Welcome back to Wake the F Up podcast, where we speak the unspoken, heal the unseen, and wake up from the autopilot that trauma so often drops onto us. I'm your host, Alix, and today I'm honored to welcome a woman who is truly living the mission of rising from the ashes. Our guest today is Marie, a best-selling author, TEDx speaker, and keynote speaker, and powerful grief advocate. After the sudden loss of her husband to a brain aneurysm, Marie made a bold decision not just to survive, but to rewrite the story of grief. Her work invites us to bring lightness into a space that often feels only dark. Marie, thank you so much for joining us today, and I'm truly grateful to have this conversation with you. Welcome to Wake the F Up podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, good morning. She is coming all the way from Australia, so she is literally drinking her coffee with us this morning, so we
Yes.
really appreciate it as it's
Cheers.
4:40 in the US. Well, cheers. So tell me a little bit about your resume speaks so many things to grief, and you carry very, very many roles as a previous griever and widow. Talk to me about how this journey got started for you and how you got into grief work as a profession.
Yeah. I'll give you the very nutshell version because we could talk about that for hours. As you know, you've got your story to tell, I've got mine. And I love that storytelling because I think it's really where people connect. And I do want to share as much as you want me to. So I'll give you the nutshell and we can delve into a little bit more if you like. I'm originally from Austria and I moved to Australia in 2004. I really felt this strong calling that I need to come and live in Australia. And when I first arrived here, I felt so home instantly. It was absolutely oh, heartwarming. I knew I belonged here. And so I made it happen in 2004. And only 10 months later, I met Rob. And another 10 months later, we got married. If anyone would have told me that, I would have asked them if they're slightly crazy because I wouldn't marry a guy that I only met 10 months prior. With Rob, it was so different. It was, the people always say to you, when you know, you know. And I was like, what are they talking about? And when I met him, I knew. I knew. It was that, he proposed to me 5 months into meeting me. And my answer was, of course, there was no doubt in my mind. And that never changed in all the years that we've been married. We had this really beautiful relationship, 2 sons, and I left my career in advertising because I always knew that you can't combine that. Success in advertising and being there for the kids, it doesn't work. And we had this plan for me to stay home for 4 years, which I did. We had 2 boys. I stayed home and then I started my own business, stumbled into the self-development world, started working predominantly in the space of mindset coaching. Highlight that. It'll come in very handy in a minute in my story. And about 7.5 years into having my own business, Rob went on a business trip and never made it home. He passed away from a brain aneurysm on the other side of Australia. Me not knowing what was happening, even now when I say that, I still get goosebumps on my right side because we were so connected. I knew something had happened and I didn't know what. So I kept trying to reach him the entire day till I finally had this epiphany that he always leaves the details with me when he goes on a business trip. I called a hotel. I told them to please check in his room. I had a split second of a vision of Rob collapsing in a shower when I told them that. And I remember shaking my head thinking, don't go there. Just don't drive yourself crazy, Marie. But that's exactly where they found him. They found him in the shower. And I even said it to them. I said, and please check in the shower. I thought they must think I'm crazy saying that, That's where they found him. And then hours and hours later, I finally received a phone call. I tried to ring the hotel back. The anxiety was just rising from that moment, calling them and them not calling me back. I knew it would be bad. I didn't know how bad. And when the sergeant rang me from the coroner's office, there was this bilingual brain moment because my mother tongue is German. And I had, until that day, never heard the word coroners before. I didn't know what it meant, but I learned fast. So the moment he introduced himself as a sergeant from the coroner's office, I'm sitting there going like, yeah, you know. And then, yeah, what's the coroner? What does that mean? I knew instantly, like as soon as he said that, I'm sorry to inform you that your husband deceased in a hotel room in Perth this morning. Whoa, okay. It was this slow motion moment for me. It was like somebody had just stopped the world from spinning, or has stopped me from spinning, and the entire world kept spinning. I can't even describe that. I always say it was like my happy song playing on a record player, and then the needle screeches and the music stops. That was my moment of finding out. So,
That's a poignant moment for most of us widows and grievers in general. It's like, but I think in a trajectory of loss like yours,
mm,
when it's unexpected and just
yeah,
like your world crashes down on you. Now, my husband lost his wife also to a brain aneurysm,
yeah,
and a lot of his PTSD and grief comes from that shock to the
mm,
system. You know, that just you
yeah,
just control and agency is ripped from you and your whole life
mm,
along with it. Talk to me a little bit about that standing still. Do you ever
yeah,
feel like that moment doesn't totally go away for us widows? It's almost like we hang on to a piece of it, and it reflects into what I now think
mm.
is the fragility of life. Like we keep that piece and we may
Yeah,
be able to
that's
move
very
fast
beautifully
again,
said. That's very
right?
beautifully said. The fragility of life, it is taught to you in a split second. It
Mhm.
is like a cut through lesson that stays with you forever. I am not one to hold on to a lot of moments in my life where I relive them and I go back to them. Obviously, when I talk in interviews or in my talks, I do share this moment and it does take me back, but I don't hold on to it. So it's not one of those things that stays with me throughout my day, throughout my life. I look at grief very differently to most people. I need to give that up front as well, because most people live from that perspective that grief stays with you forever, and I don't. So
Hmm.
I'm going to take this up front because this is a very important point to me. I treat grief like a visitor. She
Hmm.
still comes. It's been almost 7 years for us now. She still comes every now and then, knocks on my door, and I allow her in when I have time. I usually try to make time. I sit with her. Sometimes we laugh, we cry, we hug, but then I bid her farewell. She doesn't live here anymore. She stayed here for quite some time, and it was time for her to move out. And that's the sort of,
Did you
analogy that
kick
I
her
often
out?
give, because no, I ask her, I suggest it quite nicely and gently with, but that is the sort of picture that I paint and that I like. And I often tell the story of the three girls when I work in family bereavement and I work with kids. I often talk about the three girls at school being friends, and then, she starts hanging out more with the other friend, and, one friend gets a bit jealous, and then I solve it at the end and say it's grief, joy, and yourself. Like, that's the sort of
Mhm.
thing. When grief moved out, then joy came around more often, and sometimes the three of us sit together. So that's the sort of story that I like to share, because it really paints the perfect picture of how I treat grief. I don't ignore her, but she doesn't live here all the time, so I don't believe that she will stay with us forever. She might come over forever, but it becomes less and less, if that makes sense. And sometimes unexpected, I bump into her shopping, and all of a sudden I think, "Ooh." And I'm okay with that, like it doesn't matter. I have moved way past that. Oh my God, what are people going to think? Or do I have to explain it?
Yeah.
Sometimes you have this feeling you want to explain it, at the same time you don't want to tell them. It's really bizarre. But one thing I want to share that was a really pivotal and important moment in our lives, in Rob and my life, actually happened roughly 3 years before he died. And I
Mhm.
remember Rob calling me on his way home from work, and he's like, "Babe, I'm going to be like 2 hours late. There was an accident on Heathcote Road." So, for those who don't know the area, it's a one-way road through the entire national park. So, if there's an accident, then it's at least a 2-hour detour. It's massive. And for most people, when you get this phone call, when you haven't experienced loss, when you're not a widow, this is oh, it's not going to be on for dinner. What am I going to do? Like the food's going to be cold, or the boys are going to wait, whatever. You think this, and then your day moves on, and the next day it's over. For us, it was different, because Rob said he learned that a young dad has lost his life in that accident, and his daughter was only 16 months old. And it was a first time dad. So it really hit home for us, because our boys were so little. And that actually caused us to sit on our bed that night and have this what if conversation. What would you do
Mhm.
if I was to die? And vice versa. We really talked about that, because it touched us so deeply. And situations like that really make you aware of how fragile and how short life can be. and you just never know. And that
Yeah, it's true.
conversation was a long conversation, but the nutshell of it was, if something was to happen to you, I would want you to create the happiest life possible for the boys and yourself. And that is the one sentence I heard when I had to walk down the stairs to tell my boys that their dad had died. That's the
Yeah.
sentence I heard in his voice in my head. Take the boys and create the happiest life possible. It became my North Star. I had no idea how
Mm.
to do that, but I knew that's
Yeah.
where I was going. And that changed the trajectory of my entire life and also how I dealt with grief.
It's really powerful. I mean, just getting to know you in this short amount of time.
Mm,
You've have already in double whammy told me like how you continue to choose uh, lightness, joy,
yeah.
happiness.
Mm,
As they say in the SE world, the somatic world, it's you're choosing counter vortex of what is the counter
mm,
of the trauma
yeah.
vortex, right? So you're going away
Yeah.
from the trauma.
Mm,
I also was lucky enough to have my first husband tell me he wanted me to get married again. He wanted me to be happy. He wanted me to live.
mm,
And I have a very
mm,
same ferocity towards it. It is
mm,
actually also sort of my own personal mission statement to make sure that I make this world count and I make my life full of love and meaning. And really what that means is create
mm,
family that matters to my children and I.
yeah.
And yeah, I wonder sometimes if for those people who didn't have those conversations, like if
Mm,
grief becomes a little bit more difficult in
mm,
and they want to hold on to it because that's what they're hanging,
yeah.
keeping close to them at night versus maybe
Yeah.
getting that. That's a blessing that your husband said that to you, and I feel like
Yeah.
it's a blessing that mine said it to me.
I think so too. I'm absolutely convinced because um, I used to run retreats a couple of years ago, and then my career changed more and more into speaking. But when I did the retreat work, I remember we often did this role reversal scene. Like if you were in your husband's shoes and you look down on you, how you live your life right now, would you be happy? What would you want to tell her that you want her to do? Put yourself in your husband's role. What you would you want your wife to do? Would you want her to stay stuck in grief? Would you? And sometimes you get the cheeky ones and say, "Oh, no, my husband would not want me to get married again," And it's like, and it's sort of half joking, half serious. But then I always switch it to, okay, what would love do? Because wherever your husband is right now, I truly believe he is in absolute purest form of unconditional love. And from that perspective, I know for a fact that he just wants you to be happy. He wants you to live your life. And I mean, I'm going to throw this in here because I call this the irony of grief. And for me, the irony of grief is that people are stuck in grief because they're so stuck in this hole of the absence that they always talk about. It left such a hole behind, and that whole language. I'm going to talk about that later as well. But that you're stuck in this hole, and you can't. So there is this sadness, this deepest grief. This my heart is ripped apart because his life is over. He's not here anymore. So, and that's why you stop your life too. You just realize how precious life is, and then you stop your own too. I don't understand it. And I'm not talking about suicide. I'm talking about you're not doing anything with your life right now. Your life is so precious. You just told me how precious his life was. Life is so precious for everyone, no matter what, no matter who. So, with that knowledge in your heart, and you just learned it deeper than anyone else, you're not taking this opportunity with absolute oozing gratitude and joy. I understand that there's no flick the switch. My husband died. Oh, okay, I'm so joyful that my life is here. No, it doesn't work like that. You do need time. You do need time to reflect, to heal, to pause, to grieve, to cry, to laugh, to everything. You need that time to process. This is such a huge, huge thing. It needs time, and you are allowed, to be joyful. That's what, yeah.
Joy, I actually think it's almost harder sometimes to sit in joy in these in our role as grievers
Mm,
than it is to sit in the grief because the grief
of
get you
course.
get you can get very comfortable in the
Mm,
grieving role, and choosing joy is actually really not accepted by many people in your
mm,
support group. So I was going to
yeah.
ask you about your work and a lot of your books. I noticed the theme that you talk about is the language of grief, and it seems to be
Mm,
a ribbon throughout a lot of your offerings. And I was wondering if you could
yeah.
share with the listeners what that means to you and how changing our language around grief
Yeah.
might change our life.
Yeah. I'm going to use the example that I just said, the whole. there is a line that people say all the time. All the time I hear, there'll always be a hole in my heart. And I'm like, how can you live with a hole in your heart? It's physically not possible. And I know that's not what they mean. I get it. But the language that I use is there'll always be a space in my heart for Rob. And that, just feel the difference when you say that. It's so beautiful. If you say there'll always be a hole in my heart, the focus is on grief, on the absence. But if I say there'll always be a space in my heart for Rob, then there is place, there is space, there is presence versus absence. And that is just so much more healing and comforting and nurturing. So why wouldn't I choose that? And Rob was the one who taught me about the concept of two choices. So he was the one who said that to me way before I even became a coach. He was always like, babe, two choices, and I'm like, okay. And I love that because, like, all the things, often people say nothing prepares you for that. But then when you are, let's call it aware, and you've done your work and you've gone into healing, and it is a process, it's not like, oh, I'm healed, I'm done. I think I've done a lot of my healing, and there are still layers that need to be looked at, and they come up through new scenarios, whether you come into a new relationship or whether your boys come into a new phase of your life. There's always that next level where the grief knocks on the door again and comes in and goes like, you want to talk about that? I'm like, yep, come on in. Let's cry it out. And then you can go again. But the language, like, life is really hard. And then I offer them the right now. It softens everything. It's that whole, it makes it so clear that whatever you're feeling now is temporary. You're not always going to feel that pain. You're not always going to be in this darkness. But it takes choice. It takes deliberate choice that you want to heal, that you want to not always feel like that. And that you do that role reversal and go like, what would my husband want? Or my wife or my son, whoever that is who passed in your life. And do the role reversal and ask from their perspective, what would they want from me right now? That always helps. Or what would love do, my favorite. Yeah, I have another example where a widow at my retreat as well said to me, I'm still angry at my husband for leaving me. And I said, do you mind if I offer you a reframe for that? I don't just throw it on people. I usually ask them and offer. Mostly they say yes. And I said, your husband didn't leave you. He died. The outcome is the exact same. The intention is polar opposite. It's not that he wanted to leave you. He died. And there's nothing to be angry for, But with that being said, when you follow the language and you really listen to the nuances and the actual message behind it, then you quite quickly come to what the actual case is that you're dealing with here. And in her case, it was an abandonment issue that was there from her childhood. And that is something that happens all the time. Grief triggers unhealed like wounds from your childhood. And yeah.
It really
So,
does. I mean, I went into grief work and trauma therapy,
mhm,
actually while my husband was diagnosed with and working on treatment in cancer. And I
yeah.
swear, like, it was 100%. All of a sudden, I was like in therapy about this cancer journey and was
Mm,
dealing with my mother and my father. And I was like, why am I even talking about this? Like, but it was
yeah.
really the root of what was getting all this hardship out. And I think you're right
Mm,
about that. So
yeah.
talk to me a little bit about anger. I know you work a lot on anger with your
Mm,
client base and in everything you do.
yeah.
So what's your advice on anger? Because I actually feel like anger is really prevalent. Do you find yourself angry, especially as a mom? Like, that might be where I get the most angry, is that my
Mm,
children sort of
mm,
had their childhood robbed, or like I feel like often it's just unfair,
yeah.
and that makes me feel
Yeah.
angry for them.
How I actually came into it is because I actually did have, I don't want to call it anger issues. It's not that I was an angry person, but I did have triggers. Um, when I became a mom, there were triggers that my sons pushed, and all of a sudden it was like, rah, and I'm like, whoa, where did that come from? Why did that make me so angry? And I did a lot of work on that, as you can imagine, because being a coach myself, working in mindset, I took these moments of outburst and sat with them and really sat with them. I'm like, okay, where's this coming from? Where was I not heard? Because often when the outburst happens and you roar, then there is usually an element where you're not heard, where your children just ignore you, or they said something that really hurts you and they didn't realize. It's always childhood triggers, actually. That almost everything is from unhealed wounds in the past, and that hasn't even gotten grief in a mix yet. I'm talking that was before Rob passed away. So I did a lot of work around that already. And then, I'm going to touch on it very quickly and then push it aside. But, the 5 stages of grief that so many people mention, it was never intended for grief. It was anticipatory grief. When people know they are terminal, that's the 5 stages of grief. That what it refers to. When people are terminal and they know they're dying, that's where the anger, the bargaining, all of that comes in. But it has nothing to do with the actual grief after somebody died. And Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross said that many times, that she's been misinterpreted. I just wanted to throw that in there because anger often comes with those 5 stages of grief, misinterpreted. So the way it actually then oozed into the work that I do was I was asked to speak at Camp Widows. I think you have that. It's originated in America. We have it in Australia too now. And I was asked to speak. And when we talk about what topics I could bring to the camp, they said, would you speak on anger? Because nobody wanted to touch that topic. I said, yeah, I'd love to. I love this topic. Let me talk about it. So I did a workshop called Befriending Anger. So embracing anger, befriending anger, that was the sort of topic. And for me, I put that in a nutshell as well. For me, anger is a cover-up emotion. It is never the anger per se. There's always something underneath that triggers it. The outburst, the rage, whatever happens, it is triggered by something that hasn't been seen, that has been healed, that has been heard, anything that needs to be looked at. So once you actually look underneath that, if that's a frustration, if that's the not being seen, if that's fear, if that's hurt, if that's grief, that is what needs attention. That is like a little child that just needs to be held. And once you do that, and that's why I put it in as embracing anger. Once you sit with that wounded child, everything else dissolves. It's like when a child is crying, screaming, whatever, and you take the time to just sit with him or her and just take your child on your lap and hold them, it dissolves. It's like, okay, I'm safe now.
The
And that's
witnessing
a
is
sort
so
of thing.
crucial.
Yeah, exactly. You're a mom of six, that is,
Oh, it is. It is. And I
yeah,
think even
it's so
even in your
crucial.
own journey,
Mm,
we have to sit with these emotions, and you're right, like it's a duality between sitting with what
mm,
is actually happening inside of ourselves, what's the origin of your
yeah,
emotion. But more than
yeah,
that, I do think at the end of the day you're right. Like you have to choose to get out
mm,
of these heavy emotions and not stay there forever, because it's really
mm,
more dangerous
absolutely.
to stay there than it is to
Yeah,
just say, like, "This is very hard. I am
yeah,
sad,"
yeah,
and I need to
mm,
keep moving forward because
mm,
I'm in this now moment and this is my
yeah,
life.
yeah,
Well, you've created such a beautiful legacy. Do you ever
mm,
think, like, if your husband,
mhm.
could come down and tell you about your life, but did you do this exercise for yourself? And what would your husband say about all these beautiful you've written multiple
I
books,
do
you've been a
actually. That's
TEDx
that's how.
talker.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. He would be so proud. I know that, and my whole yeah, that whole tool of doing the role reversal actually came from exactly that, me doing it myself. And I'm looking at it because I've got my beautiful entertainment deck, and we had this multicolored cubby house that Rob built with the boys and myself, and it was yellow and orange and like all like really beautiful, bright, happy colors. And I remember that because I was sitting right in front of that cubby house when I recorded, when I did a live video, like, Facebook Live or whatever it was back then. It was just a 3-minute video, but I talked about exactly about that. If I was in Rob's shoes, what would he say to me? And I do this exercise because when I picture Rob, I always picture him wearing all white linen and skipping along a beach because he was such a beach person. He's Aquarius and into spearfishing and diving and snorkeling and everything, surfing. So for me, he's at this endless beach. That's how I picture him. And when he looks down on me, he always has this really cheeky grin, and I can still hear him say that. I'm so proud of you, babe. I know because he's always put me on a pedestal anyway before he passed away. So for him to watch me do this, and there was another really pivotal moment as well. that sort of was a bit of a preview for what was to come. I didn't realize it back then, but hindsight, we often look back. I don't know if you have that moment, but when I look back, there are often this like, oh my God, this is why that happened. This is what it, people say, you're not prepared for this. Nobody prepares you for that. But when you look back, I think life has fully, fully prepared me for what was to come without me realizing at the time. So there was one moment where we were walking out the door. The boys were already outside, and I was putting my shoes on. Rob was putting his shoes on, and looking at him, and I said, "I keep having this vision of me talking to thousands of people, and it scares me. I have no idea what. It's going to be something about love and connection, but I don't know what I would even talk about." And he looked at me and said, "I can so see you do that." And I still remember that. I often I spoke on a rather large stage last year. It wasn't thousands of people, but about 600, 700 people. And before I walked out, I had this moment of, I can still see you do that. And I'm like, I just had to chuckle, and it gave me this ease when I walked out on stage. And it was actually quite funny because when I walked out, there was a malfunction with the microphone. So the tech guy had to come on stage, and it was wolf whistling because I had to lift my jacket aside for him. It was so it was this fun moment already so it was completely eased into the audience, and then it was really fun being up there. So yeah, I have this little moment that often bring back memories, and I focus on those. Most people focus on these grief moments that come in, and not another one, and tears and sadness. And I always think about these happy and fun moments. It doesn't mean that grief doesn't knock on my door. She does, but joy lives here permanently. I don't see her all the time either. She sometimes goes out to the markets, but she lives with us, and I love when she comes home and we sit together. So yeah.
Okay, so 7 years later,
Mm.
and you had this beautiful love. Have you, when you're choosing joy in life again, have you dated anybody that can even touch a candle to Rob?
Ooh,
I mean, it's hard, right? It's hard when
so
if you had this beautiful relationship to get back out there.
yeah, yeah. Um, it is really a very interesting question because my godfather, who I absolutely adore, he asked me about 6 months after Rob died. He said, "Could you see yourself dating again?" I'm like, "Me? Are we talking about me here? Like my husband just passed." And the moment I said that, because he's one to ask direct questions, he's been working in relationship coaching all his life, so he's one to ask the really good questions in the right moments. And I'm like, you know what? I think when that person comes, I'll know. It's never, ever, or hardly about the time frame. It is always about when you meet that person, you'll know. It'll just feel right. Just with Rob, it was so unexpected. I just moved to the other side of the world, and then he, trots along like what knight in shining armor, and and yeah, sweeps me off my feet, and it was so unexpected. And 10 months later, I'm married, so you don't often see that coming. And I did have one relationship after Rob that was, I believe, extremely important for my healing, but not one that was meant to last. And yeah, I did
I think there's
very
something cool to say
recently.
about that though, right? Like, so
Yeah,
maybe the listeners out there who are considering dating hear what she's saying, which is not every relationship is meant to be your person or your marriage, but
yeah,
that the grief journey continues down. You learn a lot about yourself trying again.
yeah. And I think we tend to, when we are widows or widowers, I think we easily tend to then look for, okay, where's the next husband or the next wife, rather than, am I open to allowing people into my life again? And that's the exact state where I'm in now. So I don't want to think, is that the guy that I'm going to marry? Or it's not easy to just completely lock that away and not ask that question. But really, really early, very careful stages where I just want to enjoy this. I don't want to make any decisions. Is that going to is that meant to last? Is that going anywhere? Is that leading to marriage? Whatever. I just want to be in the moment right now. It's still very tender and new and fresh. And I only told my boys about it yesterday. So you asking me that now, it's like, whoa, okay.
That
That's
I
all
don't
I'm
even
going to
know, and
say
I
for
never
now.
asked that question. I was like, that just was an intuitive question. I'm like, sorry, I threw you off on
Yeah. And
that
I was
one,
like, oh
but
my God, oh my God.
Sorry. I was like, well, I have to know.
No.
I like this big love story.
Yeah.
It's really cool. And I love
Yeah. Who
what I'm
knows?
hearing a lot that you're saying is you're choosing not just maybe to reach for the positivity of choice, but maybe to be more mindful and be in the now. Do you practice a lot of mindfulness in your healing journey and in what you're coaching, what you do?
Every single day without a fail. It is so important to me. Like, I never ever go to bed without like, I've got my tiny little A6 gratitude journal, and every night I think about, like, what was the best thing of today. I really tune into that, and there's so much gratitude for what's happening in my life right now. If that's business, personal, my connection with my boys, I'm so grateful for where we are at right now. That I am more in the moment, in the present right now than I've ever been in my life, because that's all we have. And it's not in a negative way. It's like, oh, who knows what's going to happen tomorrow? It's like, right now I'm happy. Right now this is good. And of course I look into the future. And of course I think, what do I want to do with my business, with my career? What message would I like to leave in this world? What's the legacy that I want to leave behind? Um, but there is this absolute presence, and I make sure that I do whatever it takes to really live that. So about a month ago, I could hardly breathe. I felt like somebody had cut me in half right here, and I had really shallow breathing. And I'm like, what's going on? And even a friend of mine in Austria, we leave each other voice messages like, Marie, what's going on with your breathing? You've got really short breathing. I'm like, you can hear that? Oh my God, it's really, like, I could feel it, that my breathing was really short. I couldn't talk properly without getting out of breath. And I'm like, that's bizarre. So I called a friend of mine. He's like a soul brother to me, and we started breathwork sessions. Ah, it has made the world of a difference to me. The things I have allowed to come up and to sit with and to heal, like just in this past month, have made a massive, massive difference in my life. So yeah, I do whatever it takes to be in the present moment, to live a happy life, because I feel it is so precious. You and I know that, and I want to
Hmm.
make the most out of that.
I love that. And I think there's no better gift to give to Rob than that. And it's really
Yeah,
hard.
thank
I
you.
mean, staying in the present moment isn't it takes work actually. It takes
Yeah,
choice, as you're saying. So
yeah.
it sounds like your choice muscle is very strong compared to a lot of us widowers. I'm
Yeah,
like,
Rob made
walking
sure
out of this.
he worked that out with me.
I need to work on my choice muscle a little bit more. I'm like, because it is
Yeah.
true. Mindset is so powerful. Well, tell
Mm.
the listeners kind of what you're working on now. Now, of course, I'm going to have every one
Yeah.
of your books in the show notes, and we'll have a link to your
Thank
website. You
you.
can look at your TED Talk. She's on
Yeah.
YouTube. She's everywhere. She's literally everywhere. You can have her as a
Mm.
speaker. One of the coolest things
Yeah.
you're doing right now is you're a memorial manager. Is that the correct terminology? A
Yes.
memorial manager. Talk
Yeah.
to us about
Yeah.
this. So needed.
So 2 years ago, I was asked by friends of mine if I would do the memorial service, or celebration of life, I like to call it, um, for a really close friend of ours who passed away from bowel cancer at the age of not even 42. So her celebration of life was actually on her 42nd birthday. And I was asked to do that because they knew the work that I was doing. They knew that I was bringing a lot of lightness in the topic of grief, and that's what they wanted, because Annika was, she was such a, she loved life so fiercely, and she fought till the very end. She really fought, left behind three rather young children, even younger than my boys. So it was heartbreaking to watch that. And at the same time, staying in my belief that we have our soul journey planned out, and there is a reason for that. I'm not saying everything happens for a reason. I mean, yeah, but for me, it goes a lot deeper. For me, I believe in soul contracts. And I also know, because I had this spiritual epiphany a couple of weeks after I passed, upstairs in our bedroom, where I thought, wow, on a soul level, we have chosen that. And that really shifted so much for me. It's shifted so much that it really helped me in my healing journey massively, because it had this instant, massive amount of acceptance, knowing that we have chosen that. And so I just wanted to say that, because I feel that this is a really important point in this why celebrations of life. So when I was asked to do that, it was such an honor, because there was the whole, you know, I don't know, about 100 something people there, and hosted that. I helped the family with the speeches, and everybody came up to me afterwards like, do you do this for a living? You should do this for a living, you know. And I sort of started thinking about it, and then another person that had been following my movement for a couple of years because her husband's brother passed away. So she started watching what I did in the movement, Loving Life After Loss. I had that from 2019 till 2023. So I archived it now. But she was following my journey. She was following all the talks I did and everything. And she said it really helped her. And when I was in Austria, I actually caught up with her and her husband, and we met in person. It was really beautiful. And unfortunately, only a year later, her husband died from cancer. And she rang me and said, Marie, would you come to Austria and do his celebration of life? I was so honored because she flew me from Australia to Austria to the other side of the world to do her husband's celebration of life. So I'm like, wow. And then I had all these, there were a lot of people there, as you can imagine. We're like, oh, why would you fly somebody in from Australia? And this is ridiculous. Can't anybody in Austria do that? And there were a lot of naysayers and doubters in the crowd. And she told me about that. And I said, let them. Mel Robbins, I love it. I just said, let them, it doesn't matter. And they'll see. And afterwards, they all came up and said, oh my God, this is so different to anything I've ever seen. This is so, like, nobody expects you to bring joy and lightness into grief. And I think it's more important than ever in that space to not focus on the person's passing and reduce their whole life to this one moment, but to celebrate their whole life. I always go complete polar opposite. You celebrate their life. You bring all the joy and fun memories in, and the amount of laughter that happens when I hold funerals, or I don't even like to call them funerals. I usually say memorial service or celebration of life, because the word funeral per se is so heavy and dark. Although it is the same thing, you know what I mean? But it's just the language again, what we associate with it. So long and behold, last year I met this beautiful lady, Kate Morgan, who runs Tomorrow Funerals. It's a Melbourne-based business, so it's in Victoria. And she was looking for somebody to expand it into New South Wales, into Sydney, where I live. And I was like, you found me. I just loved the way she is, same thing. Her slogan is even funerals done differently. So I really loved her philosophy. I read about her in a newspaper. Somebody sent me that article, like literally old-fashioned cut out in the mail. You look at this. And I reached out to her. We met. I flew to Melbourne. She flew to Sydney. We did this beautiful interview. And yeah, we started working together. And I just did one service on Sunday, and I'm doing another one this Monday. It is now an additional part of my services that I offer. So the main things I do is speaking, coaching, and memorial services. And I also had a bit of a chat with this beautiful lady, Catherine James. I'm going to give her a shout out. She spoke on my podcast last week, and she does this trial with grief awareness programs coming into schools, and it is just amazing, the work that she does. So we had a bit of a chat whether I could maybe bring that to Australia. Not sure where that will take us. It's in very, very early stages. You're asking me the early stage questions today. I love it. And we'll see. We'll see. I'm always open to, I love collaborating, because we grow our strength, we grow our network, we grow the space where people can heal, and it's so, so important. Yeah, there's so many more of us than we ever think.
I know, and it is really
Mm-hmm.
fun when you get together with a group of younger widows, and the power that is in that energy that we hold inside of
Yeah,
ourselves to make, the world a little bit different, just a few notches
yeah,
better than what we found it, because I think we understand we just want to give the world back what we didn't have when we walked through the journey. And it's like widows can find each other in in a dark room
yeah,
for sure.
yeah,
Well, tell me, I
absolutely.
have a quick
Go ahead.
question about your
Sure.
so when you host a memorial service or a celebration of life
Mm-hmm.
service, what exactly is it that how I mean, could you bend a little bit of our ears and just tell us what it is that you're able to do to keep it light and keep it positive? Is it
Mm,
is it memory
yeah,
sharing, or what is there, like, one
yeah.
thing that you could highlight that makes it so
I
different?
think if you had to put it together in one word, it's storytelling. And for me, there is always so for example, I'm not going to give any personal details away when I share this, but a family that I'm hosting the service for next week, they sent me a eulogy and they asked me if I could read it for them. And that sometimes happens when people are especially when it happens very unexpectedly and people are in this shock moment, or really deeply emotional, I then get asked, would you mind reading the eulogy for us? And I don't mind at all, because I'm quite trained in that. Well, let's put it that way. I find it easier to stay on the outside and hold space for their emotions. I don't have to tap into the emotion. And when I read that, I obviously read it out loud and I see if anything really feels off in terms of what we talked about before, the grief language. I do highlight it for them very, very carefully, very tenderly. I just say, I just wanted to, this is the work that I do. I suggest language that is more nurturing for you. So I really want to hold space for them, because if they really want to say that, it's their language. I read it for them. That's fine. But there was exactly that line. He'll leave a hole in my heart. He'll leave a hole in our hearts, or something like that. And I shared that with them, what my perspective is on that. And then we had a shared Google Drive and we could all make changes. And last night I looked into the document and they had changed it to he expanded the space in our hearts, and I could have cried. It was so beautiful. I'm like, oh, that to me means everything, because they get it. It will plant a seed in their hearts for healing, which is phenomenal. And that's all I need. I just want people um, to change their language into celebrating the person's life rather than the absence of it. And that tiny tweak will make a massive difference to that family. I know it.
It's a really beautiful ending, and I think it's
Mm.
true. Those listening, how can we choose to celebrate and storytell versus staying stuck in the hardships that happen
Yeah,
inevitably in
yeah,
loss? Yeah,
yeah.
you got me thinking.
It's
Sometimes
exactly
I
what
might
you just
be
said. Sorry, I just wanted to
choosing.
say,
I
you
might be
just,
choosing the other way.
yeah, it is a choice thing, because we have that choice of, do I look at Rob died, or do I look like Rob lived? Like, he lived big, like he was such a lover of life, and that is what I want to keep in my mind, in my heart, in my heart, in my boys' hearts. That's what I want to keep alive. That's the love legacy that Rob leaves behind, the love that he had for his family and for his life, because family was everything to Rob, everything. I even, I'm just checking if I've got it here. No, it's upstairs. Anyway, I found this journal that Rob had in our bookshelf. I walked past the bookshelf, and this one book stood out with an aqua back with nothing written on it. I'm like, why is that book standing out? It was so bizarre. And I pulled it out, and it was Rob's journal. And I was like, wow, there was only 8 pages written. And I opened the pages, and it was such a gift, because I only found that like a year and a half ago. So, like 5 years after his passing, I opened this book, and there's everything in there is about family, family, family. How can I spend more time with Marie and the boys? I want to spend more time with Marie and the boys. Everything was about us and life, and how we can be more together, because Rob traveled quite a bit for work back then. So he was going into this, how can I make this happen so we can spend more time, and, I don't have to be away from the family so much. It was really beautiful to find that, such a gift.
Really
Yeah.
beautiful. And that's
Mm.
actually, that's happened to me too. I found a letter that I had previously actually
Yeah.
read. It was a gift, I think a birthday card,
Hmm.
and one of the final birthdays, and Carl had written me a letter, and it was tough. He said goodbye to my children,
Mm.
but then lost his ability to speak, and he had a really terrible ending. It was like just
Mm.
so much pain that I actually shut our doors down, because he had asked me to not let anyone see him,
Yeah.
in a bad state, and he
Yeah.
was he was in a bad state, and it took a lot to get him not to that state and be more
Yeah.
comfortable. And so
Yeah.
it was really tough. Like, I felt like he was able to say goodbye to a lot of people, but we really, I mean, I think we unspokenly knew. It's just we never had
Mm.
a real conversation
Yeah.
per se, or real goodbye, which is not
Yeah.
true, right? Again, that's my
Mm.
choosing.
Yeah.
Maybe not the one I wanted, And so I found this letter, and it really dawned on me, and it was years later that I was like, "Oh my god, he really did tell me, like, thank you for,
Mm.
all these things that we had to do to get where we were, and just like a lot of things that were
Oh,
like
I
I
love that.
wasn't sure how he felt, and
Mm.
it really I was like, "Did I read this?" And at the time
Mm.
I was like, I was not Marie. I was going the opposite
Mm.
way, Marie. I was like, he's never told me goodbye, and
Yeah.
it's true. I think, for the widowers and widows out there, like, go back through your things and kind of look for look for some signs when your brain calms down, when you have more
Yeah.
clarity. When you're in fight or flight, it's really challenging
Yeah.
sometimes to really see the truth.
And the memory gaps as well, we don't often talk about that, but they are so real. They are so real. I remember when I was standing at Rob's service and I was sharing the eulogy, which was more like a real, it was that speech that I saw when I told Rob, I'm talking with thousands. And again, it wasn't thousands, but there were 500 people in the audience when we held the service for Rob, and I held this speech of love and connection. That's what Rob and I were always about, love and connection. And I really left them with such a legacy about Rob, something to think about. And so many people came up afterwards saying, that speech really changed my life. People that made career changes, made changes in their relationships after that. And I'm not just saying it was because of the speech, but because of what happened to Rob and them also seeing, life can be over like that. So what are you going to do about it? Are you going to sit there and sulk? And don't get me wrong, it does take time to grieve. I'm not saying, your husband passed and now get up and live your life. I'm not saying that. There is this space that you need. And in that space, you can sit with grief and joy at the same time. It works.
I love that.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful ending point because I do think that it is duality, right? We can
Yeah.
sit and have our sadness, and we can choose to be in connection and love. All right. Well, so let's send it off. Tell me where you are in your life right now. Just like what's your favorite love and connection that you're doing? Because that's obviously the best way that you're honoring Rob.
Oh, my favorite love and connection for me right now, the most important, I shouldn't say right now because they're always important, but right now more than ever, my boys, because they're in their final year of school. So my older one's doing his HSC, my younger one is doing his final year of, like, he will finish after year 10. He wants to do, he wants to start his own business. He wants to go out in the world. He doesn't want to do the extra 2 years. We'll see at the end of the year, but this year is so about them. Just, this might be the final year of like they go out in the world, they start working, and then you don't see them again because they then get their licenses. And, this is such a moment of deep connection for me where I just want to be as present as possible. And that's where my love and connection is right now. But also, and I think that's a huge one for all the widows out there. So please, please listen to this. Self-love. Ooh, I know, daring, right? Like, do something for yourself. Because the thing is, what I do is what I teach the boys, not what I say. So I really had to pick myself up on that and say, where's your self-love, Marie? Because I lost that for a while along the way. I was so in doing protection mode that I forgot about nurturing myself, and now make sure that I do it all the time because that's how they learn.
If you've been a long-time listener of this show, you know that we work from the love framework, and that is exactly just that. It's really learning to love yourself and heal from grief. And the only way to do anything in connection and love is to go inside of yourself and give
Yeah,
yourself what you need, what your loved one who's not there anymore would want for you to have, as Marie said many times today. So she is the testament in living this a lot more clearly than I am. I got to work on my muscle of choice. It's really good. I'm
thank
coming off a
you.
grief week, and I really loved talking to you. So we're going to connect your all of your books, your TEDx talk, which is amazing. Redefining our image of a widow.
Mm,
Hello, that's what we're trying to do
yeah.
here on this show. And obviously
Yeah.
Marie too. And then Marie, if anyone is looking to seek her out to be a memorial manager, I don't
Mhm.
think of a more amazing thing to have someone help you through an entire funeral service, planning, speech, the whole
Thank you.
thing. That sounds
Yeah.
fantastic.
Thank you so much for having
Well,
me, Alex. I
thank you
really
so much
enjoyed
for
this.
having me. It's amazing to meet you. If you enjoyed this episode of Wake the F Up, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join the Wake community by downloading our app. Just search for The Wake Wellness in the Apple or Android App Store. And follow us on Instagram at The Wake Wellness. Thanks for listening.